Most people build their careers around what they're good at. But what if operating, even in your zone of excellence, could be the thing that is holding you back? Because it falls short of your zone of genius, where things are effortless, deeply energizing, and uniquely yours. So grab your cup of tea and let's talk about getting to your zone of genius. So, I really wanted to have this conversation today about your zone of genius as opposed to your zone of excellence. Because in personal branding, so many people can focus on this idea of positioning yourself for success and strategies for success. But what is lost in that conversation can often be whether or not that strategy is aligned to begin with. Are you aiming to a zone of genius or are you staying in a comfort zone? So, what is this idea of a zone of genius? This is something that I first learned about when I read the book The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks. And he talks about these four zones. And the first zone is the zone of incompetence. So, this is the zone that you don't necessarily have so much of a talent for. This is where other people excel. And you persisting in this zone is going to be a waste of your time and energy. Now, I am really careful about making statements like that because I truly believe that you can always have this growth mindset and learn to be good at things that you thought you maybe weren't so competent in. But the way that I like to think about this is that this is, for example, the accountant who doesn't actually appreciate numbers. It's the graphic designer who doesn't value visual storytelling. So this is a place that you are never going to be aligned in. Then you have your zone of competence. So this is the zone where you are competent in these areas and others are equally so as well. And this is where many successful people can still spend too much of their time in. So, for example, this might be general administration, this could be basic project management, this could be report writing. And when I'm using those examples, I don't mean that they are areas that require just a basic competency. What I mean is that you are maybe not fulfilling your full potential if you are operating in these areas when there is other areas that you could be excelling in. Having said that, I do believe that for some people, basic project management, administration, report writing could absolutely be your zone of genius. So this is more about if you're sitting in this zone and you have the potential to be doing other things. Then you also have your zone of excellence. So these are the activities that you do exceptionally well. You make a good living from this zone. So this can sound like a dream come true in many ways, but in reality, it can actually be a dangerous trap because you're addicted to a comfort zone that can keep you from your zone of genius. So, for example, this could be being a talented recruiter. This could be being someone that excels at social media management. This could be being a skilled writer. Again, this is not to say that those examples don't apply for someone's zone of genius. I mean, in the sense where if you are operating in this zone, when you still have a zone of genius that you haven't unlocked. So, the challenge with this zone in particular, why this zone of excellence can be a trap, is because you're good at these things. People reward you for doing these things. Hence, it is incentivized for you to stay in your zone of excellence. But again, the problem with the zone of excellence, if you are operating in this zone of excellence, is that you are falling short of your zone of genius. So that is the zone that we are trying to get to. So this is your natural genius. This is your ultimate path to success and satisfaction. It uses your gifts and your strengths. So, for example, this might use your natural talents. This is an area that energizes you. And this is something to emphasize as well, is that your zone of genius isn't just what you are exceptionally amazing at, it is about what is also energizing you as well. Because you may be amazing at something, but it could be something that doesn't actually energize you. This is also where things feel almost effortless. This is where you have the highest value that you are able to create for others. So, when you are in your zone of excellence, time seems to slip away. You feel so much more alive and engaged in your work. You feel like you are doing meaningful work. This is the kind of thing that when you are operating in your zone of excellence, people will comment that you have a real talent for it. You have a real knack for this area that you are in. So if you apply this back to personal branding, then you can see it as your skills are what you can do, your strengths are what you do well, whereas your zone of genius are those strengths and that unique combination of talent and skills and your unique perspective that gives you this distinct value in the marketplace. And if you are interested in reinventing your career, if you're thinking about the kind of work that you would find more meaningful, another concept, as a side note, that you may also really appreciate is the Japanese idea of ikigai, which I have talked about in my previous episodes about reinventing your career. So make sure you check out that episode as well, because if you are interested in this idea of your zone of genius, then you are going to appreciate some of those concepts as well. So number 2, let's talk about clues for your zone of genius. When I am working with my personal brand coaching clients, one of the questions that I ask them really early on in my program to get them to consider are the things that they do better than anyone else that they know. And this really gets them thinking about not just what the top priority is in their job or what they're most known for, but what they know they do better than anyone else. So, this is where you actually have the opportunity to stop and think, okay, that comes really naturally to me. People are often commenting on this thing, but I never stop to think about it because it comes so easily to me. And I just assume that other people would also feel that way as well. I assume that other people would be good at it. So stop to ask yourself, what are the things that you know you truly excel at compared to everyone else that you know? And another idea that is explored in the book is this concept of looking to your childhood, for example, to explore some of those clues as to where your zone of genius could have been. Because often your zone of genius is said to show itself in those early years before you have been conditioned to follow other paths. So, for example, in The Big Leap, Hendricks says, if you reflect on your unique ability, you'll probably find that it made its appearance early in your life. And when I read this quote, it reminded me of one of my favorite YouTubers who is a mega creator. And she talks about how she was making videos when she was as young as 10. And she would run home from school and make videos for the rest of the night in her bedroom. This is what truly lit her up. It gave her so much joy. And while she wanted to pursue a path in filmmaking, she decided to instead follow a safer path, a more corporate path, and instead pursue a degree in marketing. But eventually, she returned to her love of videos and her talent in that space, and people's appreciation for her talent absolutely exploded. Her channel has over 1 million followers. She has multiple platforms with hundreds of thousands of followers. She has her own business. She works with the biggest brands in the world in what seems to be a weekly basis. And she has written a book. She has monetized the value of her personal brand through her business, through the products that she sells, as well as through her books and other avenues as well. And this indicates that she would have been fantastic in the marketing space. She would have absolutely been operating in her zone of excellence if she had continued down that corporate path, if she had climbed the corporate ladder, obviously she would have been really successful in this space. But it was the path that she took that really landed her in her zone of genius. She leapt from the path that she could have been in her zone of excellence into her zone of genius, and it has well and truly paid off for her. So this is a way that you can think about your zone of excellence. What do you thrive in currently? But what exists beyond that? What is that potential that you haven't yet unlocked? And a few questions that you might think about asking yourself to get to your zone of genius is, what do people consistently come to me for? What work gives me energy rather than takes it away? What feels easy to me but difficult for others? What activities make me lose track of time? What impact do I love creating? Now, the point number 3 that I want to make about getting to your zone of genius is about finding flow in your zone of genius. And this is a really interesting point when it comes to operating in your zone of genius, because your zone of genius is a zone that is beyond your current comfort zone. So it implies that it does push you past your current comfort zone. But at the same time, this is where it can be such an interesting space. It is also this place of ease. So it is a place where you are pushing yourself, where you are working to your full potential, but it also just comes with ease. You feel energized by it. In the book, Hendricks says, in your zone of genius, time doesn't fly, it flows. So this obviously links back to the idea of flow in psychology, and this idea that you can get into a flow state where you lose your sense of time and everything else seems to fall away because you are deeply engaged in whatever it is that you are doing. But when I was thinking about this idea of your zone of genius, and especially that it feels like it comes with such ease, it also reminded me of this idea of the conscience competence matrix, which also has 4 different areas as well. And these can often be the areas that we need to work through before we reach a particular level of talent. So that can begin with your unconscious incompetence. This is when you don't know what you don't know. Then you have your conscious incompetence. So this is when you know what you can't do yet. You're aware of your incompetence in certain areas. Then you have conscious competence. This is when you start building the skills. You can do it, but it requires effort and concentration. But you eventually move into unconscious competence. This is when you've internalized the actions of that skill. So you don't have to think so much about the execution of the skill because it is almost coming automatically to you. So if you link back this particular zone, the unconscious competence zone, to the zone of genius, then there is some alignment there because you're naturally good at something in this zone and you don't realize that it's unusual anymore. You may assume that everyone else can do it at this point, and you might struggle to explain how you do it because it feels really obvious to you. And again, that is the beauty of your zone of genius or your unconscious competence, because it comes so naturally to you. You get to this point where you don't even realize how good you are at that particular thing. But also keep in mind that when it comes to this particular matrix, so your unconscious competence, that isn't necessarily also automatically going to be your zone of genius, because you might be amazingly good at something. You might be unconsciously competent in the highest possible way, but it could also be an area that doesn't necessarily energize you. And that is something to remember when it comes to your zone of genius. It is the work that you feel not only the most talented in, but the most aligned to as well. It's the work that you are going to find the most fulfilling. Thanks so much. For more on reinventing your career and the Japanese concept of ikigai, then check out my earlier episode on this topic. I'll see you in the next episode.